So here it is. Okay, have you seen my slide?
I have
Yes,
seen.
sir.
Okay, so my turn will be this week and then the next 2 weeks later. So until the latest before, right before the mid semester. So for me, my part will be the part of result and discussions and also conclusions. I bet with Professor Dahelmi, you have learned about the constructions and the abstracts and also probably introductions and materials and method. And therefore, in my part, I will be focused on only in this three part, result, discussions, and conclusions. So this is a very conclusive part. And so this is, we will spend about 3 weeks, including today, in our lectures. And here it is my profiles in scientific writing. So if you access Scopus, so there's a website for the Scopus in scopus.com. This is a highly reputable indexing for the international publications, as you may also be familiar with indexing, that when you publish your research results in form of paper, and then um, these journals should be indexed by the reputable indexer. So one of the kind of divisions for indexing of such journals is Scopus, and this is a highly internationally recognized indexing. And if you type my name is an author there in scopus.com, and you will find my profile here. So here it is, my profiles, and this is my affiliations, of course, Andalus University. And here it is, you can see that metric overviews. So until recently, 2021 and this month, I have 14 documents by authors. So this is the numbers of my published paper in international journals and reputable journals, and and my 14 paper have been cited in 183 times by 160 documents. It is mean that there are 160, almost more than 100 paper uh, have been cited my research. And this is a kind of levels degree. So the higher the levels of you, the higher the numbers of this. And so in Indonesia, our government, I mean, our Ministry of Research and also Education Ministry put the standard for the minimum standard to be, kind of the qualified researcher. They should get this age index up than 4. So if you got this higher level, it is meant that you will be able to apply many research grants in national levels, and you also will be reliable to get funding from our government as well as from our university. So it's kind of benefit that you will take by publishing of our research in international journals. And this is the track of my publication. So even I become a lecturer and also researcher, of course, in biology department since 2009 or December 2008 actually, but I never published my articles, my research in international journal before 2014. So because I start my PhD studies in GT Medical Schools at 2013, and then a year later, I got my paper published in international journals. And so during this, my first year, I mean, yes, after 1 year taking PhD degree, PhD study in GT medical schools, then I, with my supervisors, involved in publishing 3 articles in international reputable journals. And then the next year, it's kind of 3 again, and then, but yes, and then, so this is 4 years, 17. And then when I returned back to Indonesia, so this is my Indonesian period, 2020, 2019, and 2018 as well, and 2017. So then my levels slightly decline. As you see here that and last year I just published 2 paper, and then 19 also 2 paper, and 18 only 1 paper published. So it's kind of dynamic. And this year I recently published my paper, only 1 paper, but because I also work, I'm now working with my 3 grants, research grants. So I have a commitment to publish more paper this year, probably at least 3 or 4 papers in international journals. So if you publish your paper, and then you will be automatically recorded by this indexing systems. I just introduce it to you. And probably, but Professor Dahai may have explained about that, but I need to, okay, taking back, to look back into this sections, that the major structures, the constructions of paper in scientific articles, of course, compose of this part. So there should be introductions in the front part, and the matters and method, and then followed by result in discussions, and then the largest part is actually conclusions. And of course, there should be another a kind of part like this, the other properties like this. You see, probably like a reference, acknowledgement, that the major body of your paper should be composed of this part. So introductions, matters and method, these are in discussion and conclusion. And previously, we have focused on constructing and understanding of introductions, materials, and methods. And with my sessions, we will discuss about these sections. And what I want to show you, using this typical shape of fish. So it is commonly known in scientific articles writing, that this is kind of the graphs showing the proportions or the percentage of the sections, each section. So the introductions should be short but sharp. So when you start to write your proposals, even like if, maybe recently you are applying the proposal for your student creativity competitions, of course. So you don't have to compose your introductions in a very huge amount of paragraphs. So in scientific articles, the maximum numbers of the paragraph or introductions is only 4 or 5 paragraphs. And for me, I sometimes it's not sometimes, I commonly write only 3 or 4 paragraphs for introductions. So your introduction should be short, but it should be short, because you should point out what's the problems in your research, and etc., etc. So that should be introduction. So when you apply into the body of fish, it's kind of the snout of the fish. It should be short, but it should be also at the same time sharp or pointed. And then followed by the next part is materials and method. And this will take quite larger portions as compared with introductions. Why? Because in materials and method, you have to describe everything in detail. Your design of research, and how you collect the data, and how you I mean, harvest your data, your result, and how the data will be analyzed, will be presented. So that the details should be described in matters and method. And therefore, the portions of matters and method will be also bigger than introductions. But then the common part, the very huge, the largest part of the paper should be composed of a result and discussions. So even this is only fractions of the paper, it takes the major portions of the body of your articles. So this is the body of the fish of your masterpiece of your articles. And the latest part, of course, this should be conclusive and short, and small portion is conclusions. So, so please remember of these proportions. If you try to construct your proposal, your research, and your articles, just remember about how you divide the proportions, which part should be proportionally put as the largest one, and the shortest one, I mean the very lesser part. So don't, sometimes it just, I also frequently reviews the articles from another researcher, and then sometimes they ask me to review the articles, and also some many journals, including in Indonesia, ask me to be reviewers to evaluate the articles submitted for the journals and whether it could be accepted or not. And I frequently find that the proportion is not proportionally constructed. And the funny thing, I sometimes find that they just put the very big portion in introductions, like about half of the articles only composed of introductions, but then they just slightly put the discussions and result. So just show the very short data and follow it by 3 or 2 paragraphs for or 5 paragraphs for the discussions. That's a very bad. So we need to put in very proportionals when the introductions only maximum for 4 or 5 paragraphs, but for the result and discussions, it could be extended to like 10 or 11 paragraphs. So depend on the numbers and the size of your data. And okay, so talking about the body of articles, these acronyms, IMRID, or we call it IMROT, or in English is IMRET. So this is the constrictions of introduction. So I is introductions, and M is materials and methods, and R is a results and discussion. So result and discussion. So this is the major body of your articles that should be constructed. And with Professor Dahelmi, you have finished in studying about introductions in materials and methods, and therefore in these lectures where we'll focus only in result discussions and conclusion. And what should we dig in this part? What should we discuss in our topic of this lecture? So both result discussions and conclusions, we will try to scrutinize, try to understand what's the aspect of this such a part, the structures. So we will understand about the structures of the results and discussions, and also the structures of the conclusions, and also the contents. The contents is what should you put in the result, and what should you put in these discussions, and what something you should put in the conclusion. You should include in the conclusion. But the structures is about it's a part. What should you put in the parts, and then the middles, and the largest of that is structures. But the content is something that you should put. Something that you should put in the part, in the first, for example, in the middles and at the end. And beside we understanding the structures and content, and then we will practice to develop So we will now, by practicing, by directly writing of the result, the discussions, and the conclusion. And therefore, we will understand the development, how to develop, how to construct this part of the articles. So you will practice by yourself. I will provide the data later, and then you will explain as a result, and then you will add your discussions, and then eventually you will end up with a conclusion. That is the development process. And here it is, talking about the constructions of the articles. Previously, I have explained that there is introductions. The content is about the proposed importance and urgencies, and also highlighting the gaps. What is the gaps in it that should be included in introduction is you will define about the fact, the result of previous research. So it is something that has been known by research, by other researchers, even by your research or other researchers, that you read in publishable articles in publications, of course. So you will highlight about the gaps, the something known versus unknown. What is known? What is already known in your topic it is, and what is unknown? And therefore, that should be gaps. Describe it clearly, and the gaps is your point to fill it with your research. The important of your research should be in fulfilling the gaps. And then after the introductions, of course, the materials and methods. And the material methods, that a style of you in constructing the materials and method is about describing. So in materials and method, you don't have to put a kind of your opinion and order, but you just describe in detail how you collect the data, for example, how you design, and when you will when this study has been conducted, and how the data will be collected, and how the data is analyzed. So materials and methods is kind of the simple thing, because you just only describe in details, supporting by a reference, of course. And here then coming the result. So the result is also described. So here, but you have to describe in clearly, and at the same time should be readable of your data. So you explain about the data. You explain it in something that your readers, the audience will be, could be follow the story of you. Remembers that we are writing articles. Actually, we are telling a story to our readers. A story of what? A story of your research. What's the problems, and then how you solve the problems, and then how the result of your attention to solve such a problems, and therefore you conclude something that the audience could be, okay, I agree with this finding, and then it should be exert the benefit team. So that's kind of in the result, you will describe something, your data. So it's different in materials and method. You describe, it's not the data you describe, but you describe the way you collect the data, that something, the way you analyze your data, the way you collect the data, and the time as well, and the instrument you use to collect the data. That is the descriptions in materials method. But in result, you should explain your data in very clear way and the very nice way, so the readers will be easily understanding of your explanation in such a result. But remember that you should also limit the numbers of your explanations. So just make it concise and clearly and shortly, but at the same time, it is also informative and constructive, of course. And then the next part is about the discussions. So the natures of discussion, you don't describe again about how you collect the data, how you construct the research, and then how the research was performed. And you will support your explanations in the result. That is the discussions. So you in the result, describe about your findings. So I found this and I found this, I showed this and we found this. It's kind of the descriptions in your result. Then in the discussions, you will elaborate your findings. Elaborate is kind of you connect. So for example, this data should be supported by this data and how you interconnect, how you construct the interconnection between your data, your findings. So you have to elaborate it, and then you will compare your data with other previous research, of course, because you will, for example, you find this in your research like this, but then when you read the previous articles, okay, this should be not like this. And then how you will discuss about it. That's kind of discussions. Sometimes the in our research, sometimes like 50% or 75% different with the previous finding. So something unexpected. Like me, for example, when I run my experiments. So we inject some substance extracted from the plants, and then we actually expect that it could lower the blood glucose in diabetic mice. But unfortunately, we follow every single protocols from the previous research, including the dose and the time for injecting such a substance. And unfortunately, uh, our findings and our research is really different with the previous research. So that after we inject it, there is nothing, and so there is something just weird to be happen. The blood glucose remains stable, even lower, and then there is no such effect. So it's kind of that something you should show, and then you should discuss it, and you will propose the suggestion why it should be like this. So it's kind of the very difficult and demanding part of constructions in your articles. And based on your result that you describe, and then you discuss about your finding, elaborating with the previous research, and you propose your suggestions, and you compare it with the previous finding as well, then you will be in up with the conclusions. So the conclusion is you will find out what is the key findings in your research you describe in your story, and how it could be relevant with a global things, I mean global scope. Like me, for example, uh, when I perform experiments, and then I focus on try to explore the anti-obesity by using the fibers from the plants, like from bengquang, for example. So I isolated some substance from that, and then I try to treat the mice, my animal models, and then try to observe whether this substance could be also prevent the development of obesity in mice. And that's finding. So I found that actually that substance could prevent the development of obesity, and etc., etc. And then I should also propose the relevance. This is only study in mice, then how it could be transformed into the real conditions in humans, and how to treat the obesity in humans, whether this finding could be directly translated into clinical applications, or it is need the further confirmations. So that's kind of the conclusion. Will find out the key finding among the findings that we found here in the results. So we just summarize what is the key finding and how it could be relevant with the previous, I mean, with the global problems that need to be solved by your research. And talking, so this is constructions. And when you write your paper, you have to aware about the degrees of difficulties. So degrees of difficulties is how the difficult to construct such a part. So when we can visualize it into these graphs, So this is kind of degree of difficulties. This is the very top one, the difficult one, and this is the easy part, the lower part. So what is the difficult part is the discussion. So please remember, it's not easy. So the very hardest part in constructing and writing a scientific articles is in discussion part. So this is the very difficult. And then what is the very difficult after the discussion is introductions. This is the second grade of difficulties. And then yes, the result is quite easier than introductions. And then methods and method that's easier. And the conclusion, of course, this is very easy for you to construct the conclusions. So when you want to construct your articles, you don't use this sequence. So you can't start by writing your introductions. You will be crazy by directly write your article of starting from introduction, because the introductions is the difficult part. So start writing articles from materials and method, because you don't have a conclusion yet, because you don't focus on result yet. So if you want to construct the articles, you should start from this materials and methods. Also, when you start in writing your proposals as well, like recently you are now applying you are now writing your proposal for students academic, student competitions and in research, PKM, better for you to starting and in writing materials and method, because this is the easier part is compared with introductions. Because in introduction you have to show the gaps, and it takes a time for you to think, to learn, to focus on reading the reference. But for the methods and method, you just adopt the methods. You just describe clearly when I wanted to do this research, where, and what the methods that I need, what the substance I need, and how this method. So you just adopt from the reference, from the previous reference. So it's very easy, and therefore starting writing articles from the materials and method, and then you can move to the result. Why result is much more easier than introductions? Because result also you just describe about your data. So you don't have to think a lot about analyzing the gap, so the results. And then you can move to introductions. And then you can eventually discuss about your results. So in the sequence of structures, of course, the structures of the paper should be like this: introductions, materials and method, result, discussions, and conclusions. But in working, when you are dealing in writing your articles, you should consider about the degree of difficulties. Remember, if you work with something to get a great progress and then to create your high motivations in working in dealing in accomplishing of such talks, starting from the very easiest part. And sometimes if you could also starting from the conclusion, it's very easy. If you, for example, like the general conclusions of your research, then you start writing materials and matter, and then you move to results, describing your result. And after that, you will back to introductions. And after you construct, so now you have finished your introductions, you have finished your materials and methods, you have finished your results, and you also have finished your conclusion. So the largest part, you will be focused only on discussions. So that is how the scenario, how you will be professional in constructing and understanding between the structures of the articles and the degree of difficulties that should be considered in writing the paper. So in my lecture, in our lectures during these 3 weeks, today is a kind of general explanations from me, and then of the next 2 weeks we will discuss about it. So regarding the result, discussion, and conclusions, there are 3 questions. Previously, I have also taught you. The first is the main structures, the major structures of result. What should we put in the result? And then discussions and conclusion. And the second question is, what is the content? What is the contents of the result? What is the contents of discussions and what is the contents of the conclusions? And the last question is how to develop a representative result and discussions and conclusions. So in understanding of these three questions, please, I will suggest you that I believe that Professor Dahil may have shared it with you previously, how to write and publish scientific paper. This is kind of the summary. And you also could read, explore the other references that are readily available in the internet. So you could also download it and explore it and understand it to deal with such a question, to understand these three questions. And please also refer to my recently published paper. So this is my recently published paper, published in January, last month, about preventive affect hikama. So this is Beng Quang. In English, we call it hikama or symptoms, or sometimes I forget the other names, is young bean against diabetes development in mice fed with high fat diet. So this is international journals, applied pharmaceutical science. And next I will show you the link. And so related with our talks, so I will separate you into different groups later based on your names and listed name. Then you will work in your groups dealing to answer the questions in the talks. And then starting from the next week, I will randomly choose you to present about the result of your discussions with your friends. So, so this means that you will present the result of your answering such a questions individually as per my choice in the meeting. So during the meeting, starting from the earlier the meeting, I will random choose as the presenters. So we prepare for everybody. You should prepare your PowerPoint based on your groups, of course. The PowerPoints prepared by your groups, but you will present it as individuals. So this is the talks for you. During this, for the next weeks, we will discuss only this first question and second question. So you will try to discuss in your groups about what is the main structures of result, discussions, and conclusions, and what are the major, the main contents. I mean, yeah, what is the main contents of result, discussions, and conclusions. And at the last meeting, we will try to practice in developing a representative result discussion. So this is the instruction for you. So prepare your answer. So please read the reference as previously provided by Professor Dahilmi, this one. You may obtain the information from this, and also don't forget to explore. You will be freely explore another reference in internet, of course. And then also please also download my paper in this link published in Journal of Applied Pharmaceutical Science that I previously showed you. And then you will prepare your answers in so only question number 1 and question number 2. And you don't have to work on question number 3 because the question number 3 will be the latest part of our lectures and it is about the practice. So you will practice to write this part. So then in this scenario, in this third questions, I will provide the data for you, like the data of experiments or even that observations in the field, like exploring the biodiversity. And then you will try to write the explanations about the results based on the data. And then you will discuss it. And then eventually you will construct a conclusion based on your result and discussion. So we will practice here, but for the second questions, I mean 1 and 2 questions, you will discuss it with your groups, and then next week you will present it with your friends. So prepare your answers, your group's answers in PowerPoint files, and you will share it in our result group later after you construct it, and only answer try to answer the question number 1 and question number 2. So it's about the structures and the contents of this part of the paper. So I think that's kind of introductions from me, and I want to share with you my probably this one. Okay. So this is my articles that recently published on January. And okay, so I and my colleague, so Rita Maliza, today I use her account because I don't have premium account in you know, Zoom, because I did not purchase it yet recently. Last semester I purchased it, but then I decided to use only my friend's account. So today when you notice that my name is Rita Maliza, actually Rita Maliza is my colleague. She is a molecular biologist in Jakarta, and she also graduated from GT Medical School, but from different department with me. And we collaborate in study about the metabolic diseases like obesity and diabetes and associated metabolic disorders, of course. And this is the other is so Siti Jamalul Insan, Kanita Fadila are my students, my previous students. They are your senior, and also who are you also involved in my research. But in constructing this paper, as you see here, that when you focus and write in, okay, let me show you in very sophisticated mode of this. Sorry. Just want to share in reading mode. Okay, in reading mode. And okay. So like when you are reading a paper, you will notice about the article info. So if you want to understand about the process of how long this paper will be published starting from the submissions. So we submit these articles in the forms of the drops on May, so the latest May 2020. And then it takes kind of 3-time revisions. So we got a kind of reviews results from the reviewers, and then they ask this reviewers and discussions and any kind of dance and kind of 3 rounds. So I have to revise it in 3 times. It's not easy for you to get your article published in high quality journals. So, and eventually, so starting it takes like 6 months for you to fight with these reviewers. Like 3 or 4 reviewers will ask many questions for you, will criticize your articles, and then eventually the editors will decide whether your article will be accepted or not. Sometimes it will be in with rejections. So it's kind of a painful if you're have hardly work on your paper and eventually it rejected. So accepted on this one like a 6 month later. So there were very hardest process here between after you submit it and accept it. So it's quite difficult for you. Sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it takes a year, and then sometimes it takes 2 years for you to get your articles to be accepted, because there are war here. You have to fight with the reviewers, with your arguments, with your data, and sometimes they requires you to provide the new data and any kind of that. Wait, I will try to put on the couldn't. So previously you have learned with Professor Rahelmi, but the abstracts, so this is the part of the articles. This is the titles, and this is the authors and the affiliations, and this is the arrangements, the sequence of your authors. This is the first authors. So in this articles, I serve as a first author, and this is the co-author, so co-authors, and I also in this case as a serve as a correspondence order. So this one you will find is corresponding orders mine. So I will be responsible as the someone that could be contacted if someone curious or want to discuss on any kind of complaints about the result of this publication. So should be corresponding order. So in this case, I also functions as a first order and also corresponding order. But in other articles, the use could be first order, but you may be the not as the corresponding orders, because the corresponding order is the the boss in such a paper, in such research. So the abstract and article sample, and this is the introductions. And you see here that my introduction part is only 4 paragraphs. So this is first paragraphs, and this is the second paragraphs, and this is the only 3 paragraphs. So only 3 paragraphs. They're very short, but it is talking about a gap. So like you see, this is the gap. However, so it's kind of something that unknown yet. However, let me try to zoom it out. However, so there are several keys contents of your discussions, and previously I believe that Professor Dahelmi have also explained about what you should do. So it is about a gap, about the problems that it should be solved yet in this research. And then the last paragraph you will also explain about however something unknown. So and then in Matro's methods, you will just clearly explain about this anything about your method, about your research. So like in May, how I provide the animal models, and how I conduct the fiber extractions, and then the measurement of the parameters, and how the data will be analyzed and presented. And here it is come will be our part about the result and discussions. So result and discussion sometimes separated, like result first and the discussion later. But in many articles, you may find it like here, there is combination between result and discussion, so there is no separations. But still, you have to starting describe about your result, like me. So regarding the result, if you have a very huge data, then you have to divide it into subsections. Like me, for example, because I focus on not only on blood glucose, but also on the histological alterations, like histopathological alterations of the pancreas. So I couldn't combine it in only single subsections, and therefore I divided into 3 categories of the results. So first, I describe about the effect of this Hikama fiber on blood glucose, and then how it affects the glucose tolerance, and then how it affects the alterations of the pancreas. So it's 3 distinctive part of your research, and then you will show depict your data like this, representative play, and then this is also as well. And starting from here, so this is my discussion, I think. So this one. So this is the last part of my result. So I describe about my findings, because I directly reverse to figure 4, for example, something like that. But starting from here, it is the discussion part. So what should you put in the very first sentence of your discussions? So please notice focus on this one. Later you may read my articles that in this case, like our present result demonstrate the preventive effect of dietary fiber and recommendable against the development of type 2 diabetes caused by high-fat diet in mice. And then you will compare with the reference, and then we'll discuss anything about your findings here. And this one. So very large portions of discussions here, proper intake, and also you explain about the mechanisms, and also you may propose your suggestions what will be in the future. And remembers in the latest paragraphs, sometimes the conclusion is incorporated in discussions, result in discussion. So sometimes this conclusions subtitle is removed, but remembers the contents of the sentence, the paragraph is still remain there. So here it is the largest part of the discussion. What should you incorporate here? Like here, although our present findings in the might suggest a promising beneficial effect, at least there are two major limitations. So you also should incorporate the limitations about your data, your findings, and then how the next study should be constructed. So you will suggest further investigations to be perfect, to improve the findings and to extend the another unknown from your study. And here comes the very short sentence of the conclusions. But don't forget, in conclusion, we should also mention about the relevance. You can't just say that, okay, this is my conclusion, then you finish there without any explanation, further suggestion, or further conclusive statement about what is the relevance of your study. You study on mice, you study on and like experimental study in laboratory, and how it could be useful for in clinical base, for examples. And also the same thing, if you focus like exploring the diversity of animals in the forest, then you you can't just describe, okay, in this study I found like 50 species of animals, and 5 species are the unique one, or the unique one among the species. That's all. That's not kind of the perfect conclusions, because you just describe about the key finding. Of course, this is the key finding of you have described it, but then what is the relevance by finding this 50 species with 5 unique species? So what is the relevance for the future, for the global views, for the global aspect of this study? For example, it should be considered as the conservation area for the next period, or it should be controlled regularly. It's a kind of the relevance of your study. So this is my research. I got a funding from the Ministry of this is Research and Technology, Research Brain last year, and this year 2001 it is the largest funding period for this research, because I got 3 long-term research funding, like 3 years for the same research about hikama, about the fibers, and this year will be the finished one. But I also then apply for the another starting from this year, so it will be continue with the very, yeah, we will continue with very long expanding research with any kind of but still focus on diabetes and also obesity. Okay, so I think that's all about our lectures today, and I will share the slide later with you, and I will divide you into different groups, and then you will discuss, you will work with your groups to answer 2 questions that previously I showed you about the content and structures of results and discussions and conclusions. And then you will use the reference previously shared by Professor Rahelmi, and also you may also learn from the paper that I shared with you, the links. And then next week, so based on your group work, then you will prepare the presentations in PowerPoints, answering such questions, and then you will explain it. So randomly, probably, for example, for the first question, I will ask Adam for presentations, and then the next is probably Ayu, for example. So there will be randomly chosen. So I will decide it instantly during the meeting for you. So be prepared with your PowerPoint in each your own PC, and therefore whenever I ask you to share it later in our next meeting, and you will be directly share it on the screen, and therefore you will explain it, starting explain it, and you are as a representative of your groups. So it is meant that whether you will be uh, presented properly, we could answer it properly, it will be the value of your job and also your groups as as a representative of your groups. Okay, so I think since the time is over, I think thank you very much for your attending today, and don't forget to okay be focused on your talks and try to explore not only the reference that are provided by Professor Dahani and me, and also try to understand, because then in the futures you will be, if you want to be a researcher, you want to be, yeah, of course you will have a final defense. You will have final project for your thesis, and of course you will publish it, or at least you will construct it to be a kind of scientific articles in your for your thesis. And by understanding how you will describe about the results and how you will describe about your discussions, and then in up with the conclusions, it will be greatly support you, help you to to be nicely present your thesis, and eventually you get your degree in science, of course. And then there are many beneficial things that you will obtain by understanding about the articles, and of course constructing it up and publish, get your articles be published. Because you are performing research, for example, and you find something very interesting, like for example you find the substance from the plants or from the animals that will be beneficial in medical science and could treat the patient with some disease, and we don't publish it, so nobody will know about it, nobody will notice about it because you never publish it. And therefore something that you find, something that is actually very exciting, very important for other researchers and for medical field, but because you just put it, just keep it by yourself without sharing it, and it's kind of the mistake for you because you never tell people about your findings, and therefore the problem that you have solved never been shared with others, and their problem, and the many patients in the hospitals, and many problems in our environmentals still unresolved, and kind of something that need to be considered, how you should publish any kind of findings on your research. Thank you very much for attending today. So there are 34 of us. So I bet all of you are now attending these lectures, and you also may watch the recording of our lectures today, because I always record of every meeting, every important meeting, and therefore you can watch it later if you don't understand clearly, for example, or you sometimes we have a problem with internet connections. So this is the major problems in online lectures. We sometimes interrupted with very bad connections, and very bad bandwidth, and sometimes we also run out of electricity, and therefore you couldn't follow such a lecture start, perfectly starting from the start and until the end. And therefore, I always try to record it. And therefore, even you just have a problem with the connections, and afterward you can watch it later in YouTube, for example. So it's kind of problem solving for us against these limitations in online meeting. So thank you very much. Since that all of you now here, but I'm not. I just then I will share you the list of students enlisted. Okay, wait. I will share you. Just please confirm. So this is your name enlisted in this portal. Anissa, are you there? Hi.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So and then Arin. Hi, Arin. Are you there?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And then Nasha. Nasha. Okay, Nasha. Hi, Nasha.
Ya, Pak.
Okay, are you there? Okay,
Yes.
so Anisha, and then Muhammad Givari. Hi, Adit. Are you here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then Shifa. Hi, Shifa. There is no Shifa. Okay, so I consider Shifa absent probably. Funny.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then Tasha. So Shifa probably absent. So I just want to find who is absent in our class. Shifa actually, okay. And then Tasha and Sophia.
Yes, sir.
Are you Marina? Previously I found you. Are you okay? Are you? And then Hilma,
I'm here, sir.
Yes, sir.
Saren. Hi Saren, how are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Tiara,
Yes, sir.
okay. And then Adam, I understand Adam. Elni, hi Elni.
I'm here, sir.
And then Fakhri,
Yes,
Ahmad Fakhri.
sir.
Present, sir.
Okay. And then Saushan.
Yes, sir.
And then Ashifa.
Yes, sir.
And then how to spell your name? Richa. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Adela.
Present, sir.
Okay. And Ryan also. And Novika.
Yes, sir.
And Zahra.
Yes, sir.
Nadira. Hi Nadira.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Rizka.
Yes, sir.
Yorasaki. Previously for you. Yorasaki.
Sir.
Haniatul.
Present, sir.
And then Aziza.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you guys present. And then Diane. Hi
Yes,
Diane. And then Kayla.
Present, sir.
Then Mayasari.
yes, sir.
Then Miftahul.
Present, sir.
Me. Hi Umi.
Yes, sir.
And then we're
sir.
and
Present, sir.
okay. So only C4 that actually did not attend our lectures, so probably only about 34, right? So 34 students, okay. So actually the majority of our class is coming from 2019, right? And only 12 of you are from 2018, okay. So that is so, okay, thank you very much. We should finish our lectures today. See you later next week, and I will share the group, each one of you. So I will divide the groups of you, probably five or three or five groups. So I just, and then we will describe, we'll understand, answer, try to discuss about the talks of you. So bye bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Wassalam.
Thank you
Thank you so much,
sir.
sir. So much, sir.